Jnana Kosha, Vedas.
ॐ गणानां त्वा गणपतिगुं हवामहे कविं कवीनामुपवस्त्रमस्तमं ज्येष्ठराजं ब्रह्मणान् ब्रह्मणस्पदानः शृण्वन्नोतिभिस्सीदसादनम्
Shukla Yajurveda Upanishads, Mandala Brahmana Upanishad. This is the teaching of Sun God to his disciple Yajnavalkya. This deals with the principle of the soul through yogic practice. Definitions of various terms used in yoga is also given. Tells in detail about yogic practice and tells us about what is Sambhavi Mudra. Om, that Brahman is infinite and this universe is infinite. The infinite proceeds from the infinite. Then taking the infinitude of the infinite, it remains as the infinite alone. Om, let there be peace in me, let there be peace in my environment, and let there be peace in the forces that act on me. Brahmana. Om, the great Muni Yajnavalkya, went to Aditya Loka, the sun's world, and saluting him, the Purusha of the sun, said, O revered sir, describe to me the Atman Tattva, the Tattva or truth of Atman. To which Narayana, the Purusha of the sun, replied, I shall describe the eightfold yoga together with Jnana, the conquering of cold and heat as well as hunger and sleep, the preserving of sweet patience and unruffledness ever, and the restraining of the organs from the sensual objects. All these come under Yama. Devotion to one's Guru, love of the true path, enjoyment of objects, producing happiness, internal satisfaction, freedom from association, living in a retired place, the controlling of the manas and the not longing after the fruits of actions, and a state of Vairagya. All these constitute Niyama. The sitting in any posture pleasant to one and clothed in tatters or bark is prescribed for asana, posture. Inspiration, restraint of breath and expiration, which have respectively 16, 64 and 32 matras, constitute pranayama, restraint of breath. The restraining of the mind from the objects of senses is pratyahara. The contemplation of the oneness of consciousness in all objects is dhyana. The mind having been drawn away from the objects of the senses, the fixing of the Chaitanya consciousness on one alone is dharana. The forgetting of oneself is dhyana in samadhi. He who thus knows the 8 subtle parts of yoga attains salvation. The body has 5 stains: passion, anger, outbreathing, fear, and sleep. The removal of these can be effected respectively by absence of sankalpa, forgiveness, moderate food, carefulness, and a spiritual sight of tattvas. In order to cross the ocean of samsara, where sleep and fear are the serpents, injury are the waves, Trishna is the whirlpool and wife is the mire, one should adhere to the subtle path and overstepping tattva and other gunas should look out for taraka. Taraka is Brahman, which being in the middle of the 2 eyebrows is of the nature of the spiritual effulgence of Sachidananda. The spiritual seeing through the 3 lakshas or the 3 kinds of introvision is the means to it, Brahman. Sushumna, which is from the Muladhara to Brahmarandhra, has the radiance of the sun. In the center of it is Kundalini, shining like crores of lightning and subtle as the thread in the lotus stalk. Tamas is destroyed there. Through seeing it, all sins are destroyed. When the two ears are closed by the tips of the forefingers, a hutkara or booming sound is heard. When the mind is fixed on it, it sees a blue light between the eyes as also in the heart. This is antara lakshya or internal introvision. In the bahir lakshya or external introvision, one sees in order before his nose at distance of 4, 6, 8, 10 and 12 digits, the space of blue color, then a color resembling shyama, indigo black, and then shining as rakta, red wave, and then with the two pitta, yellow and orange red colors. Then he is a yogin. When one looks at the external space moving the eyes and sees streaks of light at the corners of his eyes, then his vision can be made steady. When one sees jyoti, spiritual light, above his head, 12 digits in length, then he attains the state of nectar. In the madhya lakshya, or in the middle one sees the variegated colors of the morning as if the sun, the moon and the fire had joined together in the akasha, that is without them. Then he comes to have their nature. Through practice, he becomes one with akasha, devoid of all gunas and peculiarities. At first akasha with its shining stars becomes to him para akasha as dark as tamas itself, and he becomes one with para akasha shining with stars and deep as tamas. He becomes one with maha akasha resplendent with the fire of the deluge. Then he becomes one with tattva akasha lighted with the brightness which is the highest and the best of all. Then he becomes one with surya akasha brightened by a crore of suns. By practicing thus he becomes one with them. He who knows them becomes thus. Know that yoga is twofold through its division into the purva earlier and the uttara later. The earlier is taraka and the later is amanasaka. Taraka is divided into murti with limitations and amurti without limitation. That is murti taraka, which goes to the end of the senses. That is amurti taraka, which goes beyond the two eyebrows. Both these should be performed through manasa. Antara drishti associated with manasa comes to aid taraka. Tejas, spiritual light, appears in the hole between the two eyebrows. This taraka is the earlier one. The later is amanashika. The great jyoti's light is above the root of the palate. By seeing it, one gets the siddhi's anima. Sambhavi mudra occurs when the lakshya is internal, while the physical eyes are seeing externally without winking. This is the great science which is concealed in all the tattvas. When this is known, one does not stay in samsara. Its worship gives salvation. Antara lakshya is of the nature of jala jyotis. It is known by the great rishis and invisible both to the internal and external senses. Sahasra Jalajyotis is the Antara Lakshya. Some say the form of Purusha in the cave of Buddhi, beautiful in all its parts, is Antara Lakshya. Some again say that the all-quiescent Nilankata, accompanied by Uma, and having 5 months and latent in the midst of the sphere, in the brain is Antaralakshya, whilst others say that the Purusha of the dimensions of a thumb is Antaralakshya. A few again say Antaralakshya is the one self-made supreme. Through introvision is the state of a Jivanamukta. All the different statements above made pertain to Atman alone. He alone is a Brahma, Nishata, who sees that the above Lakshya is the pure Atman. The Jiva, which is the 25th Tattva, having abandoned the 24th Tattva, becomes a Jivan Mukta through the conviction that the 26th Tattva, Paramatman, is I alone, becoming one with Antaralaksha in the emancipated state by means of Antaralaksha. Jiva becomes one with the partless sphere of Parama Akasha. Thus ends the first Brahmana. Brahmana 2. Then Yajnavalkya asked the Purusha in the sphere of the sun, O Lord, Antaralaksha has been described many times, but it has never been understood by me. Pray describe it to me. He replied, It is the source of the five elements, have the luster of many, lightning, and has four seats having that is the Brahman. In its midst there arises the manifestation of Tattva. It is very hidden and unmanifested. It can be known only by one who has got into the boat of Jnana. It is the object of both Bahir and Antar Lakshyas. In its midst is absorbed the whole world. It is the vast partless universe beyond Nada, Bindu and Kala. Above it is the sphere of the sun. In its midst is the sphere of the nectary moon. In its midst is the sphere of the partless Brahma Tejas. It has the brightness of Shukla like the ray of lightning. It alone has the characteristic of Sambhavi. In seeing this, there are three kinds of drishti: Ama, Pratipat and Purnima. The sight of Ama is one with closed eyes, that with half opened eyes is Pratipat, while that with fully opened eyes is Purnima. Of these, the practice of Purnima should be resorted to. Its Lakshya is the tip of the nose, then is seen a deep darkness at the root of the palate. By practicing this, a Jyotish of the form of an endless sphere is seen. This alone is Brahman, the Sachidananda. When the mind is absorbed in bliss, thus naturally produced, then does Sambhavi takes place. She, Sambhavi alone, is called Khechari. By practicing it, a man obtains firmness of mind. Through it, he obtains firmness of Vayu. The following are the signs. First is seen like a star, then a reflecting diamond, then the sphere of full moon, then the sphere of the brightness of 9 gems, then the sphere of midday sun, then the sphere of the flame of Agni. All these are seen in order. Then there is the light in the western direction, then the lustres of crystal, smoke, bindu, nada, kala, star, firefly, lamp, eye, gold and 9 gems are seen. This alone is the form of pranava. Having united prana and apana and holding the breath in kumbhaka, one should fix his concentration at the tip of his nose and making Shanmukhi with the fingers of both his hands, one hears the sound of pranava, Om, in which Manasa becomes absorbed. Such a man has not even the touch of karma. The karma is verily performed at the rising or setting of the sun. That is like Sandhya Vandana, our daily prayers. As there is no rising or setting, but only the ever shining of the sun of Chit, the higher consciousness, in the heart of a man who knows thus, he has no karma to perform. Rising above the conception of the day and night through the annihilation of sound and time, he becomes one with Brahman through the all-full jnana and the attaining of the state of Unmani. Through the state of Unmani, he becomes Amanasaka, not being troubled by any thoughts, then constitutes the dhyana. The abandoning of the karmas constitute avahana. Being firm in the unshaken wisdom constitutes asana. Being in the state of unmani constitutes the padya. Preserving the state of a manasika constitutes the aragya. Being in state of eternal brightness and shoreless nectar constitutes snana. The contemplation of Atman as present in all constitutes the application of the idol of sandal. The remaining is the real state of the trek. Spiritual eye is the worshipping with akshata, non-broken rice. The attaining of chit consciousness is the worshipping with flower. The real state of Agni of Chit is the Dhupa. The state of the sun of Chit is the Deepa. The union of oneself with the nectar of full moon is Naivedya. The immobility is that state of the ego being one with all is Pradakshina. The conception of I am he is Namaskara. The silence is the Sruti. The all contentment is the Vishtagyana. This is the worship of Atman by all Raja Yoginis. He who knows this knows all. When the Triputi are thus dispelled, he becomes the Kaivalya Jyotis. Without bhava or abhava, full and motionless, like the ocean without the tides, or like the lamp without the wind. He becomes a Brahmavat by sizing at the end of the sleeping state, even while in the awakening state. Though the mind is absorbed in Shushpati, is also in Samadhi. There is much difference between them. As the mind is absorbed in tamas, it does not become the means of salvation. In Samadhi, as the modifications of tamas in him are rooted away, the mind rises itself to the nature of the pathless. All that is no other than Shakshi Chaitanya, into which the absorption of the whole universe takes place, in as much as the universe is but a delusion of the mind and is therefore not different from it. Though the universe appears perhaps as outside of the mind, still it is unreal. He who knows Brahman and who is the sole enjoyer of Brahmic bliss, which is eternal and has dawned once, that man becomes one with Brahman. He in whom Sankalpa Parishas has got mukti in his hand. Therefore, one becomes an emancipated person through the contemplation of Paramatman. Having given up both bhava and abhava, one becomes a Jivan Mukta by leaving off again and again in all states jnana and gyana, dhyana and dheya, lakshya and alakshya, drishya and adrishya, and uha and apoha. He who knows this know all. There are 5 avasthas, states: Jagrat, waking; Swapna, dreaming; Shushupti, dreamless sleeping; the Turiya, 4th; and the Turiyatita, that beyond the 4th. The Jiva, ego, that is engaged in the waking state, becomes attached to the Pravarti, worldly path, and is the particular of Naraka, hell, as the fruit of sins. He desires Swarga, heaven, as the fruit of his virtuous actions. This very same person becomes indifferent to all these saying. Enough of the births tending to actions, the fruits of which tend to bondage till the end of this mundane existence. Then he pursues the Nirvritti path with a view to attain emancipation, and this person then takes refuge in a spiritual instructor in order to cross this mundane existence. Giving up passion and others, he does only those he is asked to do. Then, having acquired the 4 sadhanas, he attains in the middle of the lotus of his heart the reality of Antarlaksha, that is but the Sat of Lord, and begins to recognize the bliss of Brahman which he had left in his Shushupti state. At last he attains this state of discrimination. I think I am the non-dual one only. I was in jnana for some time, in the waking state, and called therefore Vishwa. I became somehow or involuntarily a Taijasya through the reflection of the affinities of the forgotten waking state, and now I am a prajna through the disappearance of these two states. Therefore, I am one only. I, as more than one, through the differences of state and place, I do appear, and there is nothing of differentiation of class besides me, having expelled even the smack of the difference of conception between I and that. Through the thought, I am the pure and the secondless Brahman, and having attained the path of salvation, which is of the nature of the Parabrahman, after having become one with it through the dhyana of the sun's sphere, as shining with himself, he becomes fully ripened for getting salvation. Sankalpa and others are the causes of the bondage of the mind, and the mind devoid of these becomes fit for salvation. Possessing such a mind free from all sankalpa, and withdrawing himself from the outer world of sight and others, and so keeping himself out of the order of the universe, he looks upon all the world as Atman, abandons the conception of I, thinks I am Brahman, and considers all these as Atman. Through these he becomes one who has done this duty. The yogin is one that has realized Brahman, that is all full beyond Turiya. They, the people, extolled him as Brahman, and becoming the object of the praise of the whole world, he wanders over different countries, placing the Bindu in the Kasa of Paramatman, and pursuing the path of the pathless bliss produced by the pure, secondless, stainless, and innate yoga, sleep of Manasika. He becomes an emancipated person. Then the yogin becomes immersed in the ocean of bliss. When compared to it, the bliss of Indra and others is very little. He who gets this bliss is the supreme yogin. Thus ends the second Brahman. Brahman 3. The great sage Yajnavalkya then asked the Purusha in the sphere of the sun, O Lord, though the nature of Amanaska has been defined by you, yet I forget it or do not understand it clearly. Therefore, pray explain it again to me. Accordingly, the Purusha said, this Amanashka is a great secret. By knowing this, one becomes a person who had done his duty. One should look upon it as a Paramatman, associated with Sambhavi Mudra, and should know all those that can be known through cognition of them. Then seeing Parabrahma in his own Atman as the Lord of all, the immeasurable, the birthless, the auspicious, the supreme Akasha, the supportless, the secondless, the only goal of Brahma, Vishnu and Rudra, and the cause of all, and assuring himself that he who plays in the cave of the heart is such a one, he should raise himself above the dualities of existence and non-existence, and knowing the experience of the Unmani of his manas, he then attains the state of Parabrahman, which is motionless as a lamp in a windless place, having reached the ocean of Brahmic bliss by means of the river of Amanashka Yoga, through the destruction of all his senses. Then he resembles a dry tree. Having lost all idea of the universe through the disappearance of growth, sleep, disease, expiration, and inspiration, his body being always steady, he comes to have a supreme quiescence, being devoid of the movements of his manasa, and becomes absorbed in Paramatman. The destruction of manasa takes place after the destruction of the collective senses, like the cow's udder that shrivels up after the milk has been drawn. It is this that is Amanashka. By following this, one becomes always pure and becomes one that has done his duty. Having been filled with the pathless bliss by means of the path of Taraka Yoga, Through the initiation into the sacred sentences, I am Pa, that thou art, I am thou alone, thou art I alone. When his manas is immersed in the akasha and he becomes all full, and when he attains the unmani state, having abandoned all his collective senses, he conquers all sorrows and impurities through the partless bliss. Having attained the fruits of kaivalya, ripened through the collective merits gathered in all his previous lives, and thinking always, I am Brahman, becomes one that has done his duty. I am thou alone, there is no difference between thee and me owing to the fullness of Paramatma. Saying thus, he, the Purusha of the sun, embraced his people and made him understand it. Thus ends the third Brahman. Brahman fourth. Then Yajnavalkya addressed the Purusha in the spear and said, Pray explain to me in detail the nature of the fivefold division of Akasha. He replied, There are five: Akasha, Parakasha, Mahakasha, Suryakasha, and Paramakasha. That which is of the nature of darkness, both in and out in the first Akasha. That which has the fire of deluge, both in and out in, is truly Mahakasha. That which has the brightness of the sun, both in and out, is Suryakasha. The brightness which is indestructible, all-pervading, and all the nature of unrivaled bliss is Paramakasha. By cognizing this according to this description, one becomes of the nature. He is the yogin only in name who does not concise well the 9 chakras, the 6 adharas, and 3 lakshyas, and the 5 akasha. Thus ends the fourth Brahman. Brahman 5. The manasa influenced by worldly objects is liable to bondage, and that manas, which is not so influenced by these, is fit for salvation. Hence all the world becomes an object of chitta, whereas the same chitta, when it is supportless and well ripe in the state of unmani, becomes worthy of laya, absorption in Brahman. This absorption you should learn from me, who am the all-full. I alone am the cause of the absorption of manasa. The manasa is within the jyotis, which again is latent in the spiritual sound which pertains to the anahata sound. The manasa, which is the agent of creation, preservation, and destruction of the three worlds, that same manasa becomes absorbed in that which is the highest seat of Vishnu. Through such an absorption, one gets the pure and secondless state, owing to the absence of difference then. This alone is the highest truth. He who knows this will wander in the world like a lad or an idiot or a demon or simpleton. By practicing this amanashka, one is ever contented. His urine and feces becomes diminished, his food becomes lessened, he becomes strong in body, and his limbs are free from disease and sleep. Then his breath and eyes being motionless, he realizes Brahman and attains the nature of bliss. That ascetic who is intent on drinking the nectar of Brahman produced by the long practice of this kind of samadhi becomes a paramahamsa, ascetic, or an avadhuta. By seeing him, all the world becomes pure, and even an illiterate person who serves him is freed from bondage. He, the ascetic, enables the members of his family for 101 generations to cross the ocean of samsara, and his mother, father, wife, and children. All these are similarly freed. This is the Upanishad. Thus ends the fifth Brahman. Om, that Brahman is infinite, and this universe is infinite. The infinite proceeds from the infinite. Then, taking the infinitude of the infinite, it remains as the infinite alone. Om, let there be peace in me. Let there be peace in my environment. Let there be peace in the forces that act on me. Here ends the Mandala Brahmana Upanishad belonging to the Shukla Yajur Veda.